The day Ibrahim Traoré walked into the gold mine unannounced, everything changed. The machines were loud. Dust filled the air. Foreign engineers stood in clean helmets, watching as Burkina Faso workers bent under the sun, their hands rough, their boots torn. Gold was being pulled from the earth, Burkina Faso's gold, but the men who owned the machines spoke in foreign accents. And that morning, no one expected the president to appear. A convoy of simple military vehicles rolled through the red dirt road without warning. No long sirens, no big announcement, just dust rising behind black tires. Workers stopped first. One man removed his helmet and squinted into the distance. "Is that?" Another whispered, "It's him." The vehicle stopped near the main extraction pit. Soldiers stepped out first, scanning the area. Then Ibrahim Traoré stepped down slowly from the second vehicle. He wore no expensive suit, no gold watch, just a plain military uniform and boots covered in the same dust as the workers. The foreign site manager, a tall man with pale skin and a stiff smile, rushed forward with two assistants behind him. "Mr. President," he said quickly, forcing a laugh, "we were not informed of your visit." Traoré looked around instead of answering. He saw a worker with a bandaged hand, still lifting equipment. He saw another man coughing heavily near a machine leaking smoke. He saw a young boy, too young, carrying water buckets to older miners. His jaw tightened. "You were not informed," Traoré repeated slowly, finally turning to the manager. "That is the point." The manager shifted uncomfortably. "We follow all agreed contracts," he said. "Everything here is legal." Traoré nodded once. "Legal," he said quietly. "But is it just?" The manager's smile faded. Around them, workers gathered at a distance, pretending to continue their tasks but listening carefully. Traoré walked toward the extraction pit. He picked up a handful of soil mixed with glittering gold dust. He let it fall slowly between his fingers. "This," he said, "belongs to the people of Burkina Faso." He turned sharply. "And yet the men who touch it cannot afford proper boots?" No one spoke. He pointed toward the coughing worker. "How many hours does he work?" The manager hesitated. 12-hour shifts, one assistant answered. "Breaks?" Traoré asked. "2 short breaks." "And safety insurance?" The assistant looked at the manager before answering. "Limited coverage." Traoré's eyes hardened. "Limited?" he repeated. He began walking toward the workers. The soldiers did not stop him. The foreign managers followed nervously. Traoré stopped in front of the bandaged worker. "What happened to your hand?" he asked gently. The man looked shocked to be addressed directly. "Machine jammed, Captain," he said. "No proper guard installed. It cut me. And you are still working?" The man lowered his eyes. "If I stop, they replace me." A heavy silence fell over the site. Traoré slowly turned back to the foreign manager. "You replace injured men like broken tools?" he asked. The manager tried to regain control. "President, mining is a tough industry everywhere in the world. These are normal risks." Traoré stepped closer. "No," he said firmly. "Exploitation is not a normal risk. It is a choice." The air felt tighter. Workers stopped pretending to work now. They stood openly watching. Traoré raised his voice, not shouting, but strong enough to echo across the pit. "From today, this company will change how it operates. Wages will increase. Safety standards will be upgraded. Medical care will be provided fully. Workers' contracts will be rewritten to protect their rights." The manager laughed nervously. "With respect, Mr. President, contracts are already signed. These terms were agreed years ago." Traoré looked him straight in the eye. "Contracts signed in weakness," he said, "can be rewritten in strength." A murmur spread through the workers. The manager's face turned red. "Our investors will not accept sudden changes," he said. "There are international laws, arbitration courts." Traoré did not blink. "And there are national laws," he replied calmly. "And we are updating them." He signaled to one of his advisors, who stepped forward with a folder. "A new labor protection bill is being approved this week," the advisor announced. "It guarantees minimum wage increases, safety inspections, mandatory health insurance, and profit-sharing percentages for local communities." The manager's voice sharpened. "You cannot just threaten companies like this. If foreign companies leave, your economy will suffer." Traoré's expression changed, not angry, not smiling, just firm. If a company cannot respect our workers, he said clearly, then no company will work in Burkina Faso. The sentence fell like a hammer. Even the wind seemed to pause. The manager's assistants exchanged worried looks. "President," the manager said, trying a different tone, "we bring technology. We bring expertise. We bring jobs." Traoré stepped toward him again. "You bring machines," he corrected. "Our people bring their sweat. Our land brings the gold. Do not confuse cooperation with charity," a worker at the back whispered. "He speaks for us." Another nodded, eyes shining. The manager tried one last argument. "If you push too hard, international partners may isolate your country." Traoré's voice grew colder. Burkina Faso survived colonization. It survived coups. It survived terrorism. We will survive greedy investors. The workers erupted in quiet but powerful applause. Not loud cheers. Not chaos. Just strong hands hitting together in agreement. The manager looked around and realized something had shifted. The fear was no longer in the workers' eyes. It was in his. Traoré turned back to the crowd. "My brothers," he said, raising his voice, "no one should risk his life for crumbs while others fly away with millions." He pointed to the gold pit again. "This gold must build our schools, our hospitals, our roads, not just foreign bank accounts," a young worker shouted. "We have waited years," Traoré nodded. "And you waited too long," he said. "That ends now." He then did something unexpected. He removed his gloves and stepped down into the dusty pit himself. Gasps spread across the site. He bent down beside the miners and lifted a heavy tool. "Show me," he said. For a few minutes, the president of Burkina Faso worked beside his miners, lifting, pushing, feeling the heat and the weight. Foreign engineers stared in disbelief. Cameras captured everything. When he climbed back up, sweat covered his forehead. He looked directly at the manager. "Now I understand the weight you place on them," he said quietly. He stepped closer, voice low but intense. "If I return in 3 months and nothing has changed, this mine will be nationalized." The word exploded in the manager's mind. "Nationalized? You wouldn't dare," the manager whispered. Traoré's eyes flashed. "Watch me." He then turned toward the workers again. "And this message is not only for this company," he declared. "It is for every foreign company operating in Burkina Faso." He raised his hand toward the sky. "Respect our workers. Respect our laws. Respect our dignity. Or pack your machines and leave." The workers erupted louder this time. Dust rose as boots stomped the ground. In that moment, something deeper than wages was happening. Pride was returning. As the convoy prepared to leave, one old miner approached carefully. His beard was gray. His hands shook slightly. "Captain," he said softly, "I worked here since before independence. I saw many leaders come and go. They promised. They smiled. Then they disappeared." He looked directly into Traoré's eyes. "Do not disappear." Traoré held his gaze. "I am not here for applause," he said. "I am here for change." The old man nodded slowly. As the vehicles drove away, the foreign manager stood frozen. His assistant whispered urgently, "Sir, headquarters will not like this." The manager swallowed. "Call them," he said quietly. "Tell them the rules have changed." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, lawmakers gathered in an emergency session. The new labor protection bill was placed on the table. Television cameras broadcast live. Citizens filled the public galleries. The Minister of Labor stood and spoke. "For too long, our workers have been treated as disposable. Today we vote to protect them." Votes were cast. Hands raised. The bill passed with overwhelming support. Outside the Parliament building, crowds cheered. On the same evening, Traoré recorded a message not just for Burkina Faso, but for Africa. He stood before a simple backdrop of the national flag. His voice was steady. "To my brothers and sisters across Africa," he began, "our resources are not curses. They are blessings. But they become curses when we allow others to take them while our people remain poor." He leaned forward slightly. "Protect your workers. Rewrite unfair contracts. Stand firm. They need our gold more than we need their approval." The message spread quickly across social media. In neighboring countries, young people shared clips. In mining towns across Africa, workers listened carefully. Some leaders remained silent. Others felt pressure rising. But in Burkina Faso, something had shifted permanently. At that gold mine, the next morning, the manager held an emergency meeting. "Improve safety equipment immediately," he ordered. "Increase wages by 20%. Begin renegotiation of community royalties." His assistants blinked. "That fast?" He exhaled slowly. "You saw his eyes," he said. "He means it." Back at the presidential office, Traoré stood by the window overlooking the city. An advisor approached. "International investors are nervous," the advisor reported. "Some threaten legal action." Traoré nodded calmly. "Let them," he said. "If we bend now, we stay bent forever." Outside, children played in the streets. Inside the mines, workers whispered new hopes. And across Africa, a quiet question began to rise. What if we all did the same? The ground beneath Burkina Faso still held gold and cobalt, but something even more valuable was being uncovered. Courage. The morning after his speech to Africa, the pressure began. It did not come with soldiers or loud threats. It came in phone calls. The Minister of Finance rushed into the presidential office with papers in his shaking hands. "Mr. President," he said, "3 international investment groups have suspended funding. They are warning of economic retaliation." Traoré did not look surprised. "And the mining company?" he asked. "They are requesting an emergency meeting. They say your statements caused panic in foreign markets." Traoré leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them panic." By midday, a delegation from the mining corporation arrived in Ouagadougou. Expensive suits, tight smiles, cold eyes. They were not laughing now. They sat across from Traoré in a long conference room. Cameras were not allowed inside. The lead executive, a gray-haired man with a smooth voice, began carefully. "President Traoré, we respect your passion for your people, but sudden policy shifts damage investor confidence." Traoré folded his hands calmly. "What damages confidence more?" he asked. "Fair wages? Or injured workers with no compensation?" The executive kept his smile. "We operate globally. Burkina Faso is one of many locations. If operating conditions become unstable, our board may reconsider its presence here." Traoré leaned forward slightly. "And if you leave," he said, "another company will come under the new rules." The executive's voice hardened. "You underestimate the global network behind us." Traoré's eyes sharpened. "And you underestimate a nation that has survived worse than corporate pressure." Silence filled the room. Another executive spoke up. "Our shareholders expect profit margins, increasing wages, safety standards, and community royalties will cut deeply into revenue." Traoré replied immediately. "And cutting into human dignity has cut deeply into our people for decades." The tension was thick. One advisor whispered to the president, "Sir, perhaps we can negotiate gradual implementation." Traoré shook his head slightly. "Gradual justice," he said, "is delayed justice." The executives exchanged looks. Finally, the gray-haired man spoke again. "If we agree to partial wage increases and improved safety equipment, will you reconsider the threat of nationalization?" Traoré paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I am not threatening," he said calmly. "I am preparing." He stood up slowly. "You have 3 months," he continued. "Show visible change. Signed contracts with workers, verified safety upgrades, transparent financial reporting. If you fail, we will assume control of operations." The meeting ended without handshakes. Outside the building, reporters waited. "Mr. President," one shouted, "are you declaring economic war?" Traoré stopped and faced the cameras. "No," he said clearly. "We are declaring economic dignity." The clip spread across the continent. In Ghana, young miners shared it in WhatsApp groups. In Congo, Cobalt workers replayed it in crowded dormitories. In Mali and Niger, activists wrote, "This is the model." But not everyone was celebrating. That night, intelligence officers delivered a quiet warning. "There are rumors," one officer said, "that foreign-backed groups may attempt to destabilize the country." Traoré did not flinch. "They always do," he replied. "Protests may be funded. Strikes may be manipulated. Media campaigns are already starting." On foreign news channels, headlines appeared. "Burkina Faso risks economic collapse." "Investor flight likely after anti-business speech." Is Traoré driving the country into isolation? In wealthy capitals abroad, analysts shook their heads. He's too young, one said on television. He doesn't understand global economics. Back in Burkina Faso, a different story was unfolding. At the gold mine, workers gathered around a new notice board. Large printed letters announced immediate wage adjustment, mandatory safety equipment distribution, on-site medical clinic construction, compensation fund for injuries, community development royalty increase. Workers stared in disbelief. Is this real? One whispered. A supervisor nodded nervously. Orders from headquarters, he said. Within days, new boots arrived. Helmets with proper shields, gloves thick enough to protect hands. The coughing worker from before received medical treatment and was assigned lighter duty during recovery. The bandaged worker was called into the office and offered compensation. For the first time in years, workers felt visible. But the company was not happy. In a private boardroom overseas, executives argued. He is setting a dangerous precedent, one said. If other African nations follow this example, our operating costs will explode. Another responded, we must pressure him quietly, and quietly they did. International lenders delayed credit lines. Trade agreements were reviewed. Subtle warnings were delivered through diplomatic channels. One evening, a foreign ambassador requested a meeting. In the presidential office, the ambassador spoke in polite tones. President Traoré, stability is important. Investors fear sudden policy shifts. Traoré nodded. So do workers, he replied. The ambassador smiled thinly. Perhaps compromise would protect your economy. Traoré's response was calm but firm. My economy cannot grow on broken backs. Outside, rumors began circulating online. Fake social media posts claimed. Mining companies leaving immediately. Mass unemployment coming. Panic tried to grow. But Traoré addressed the nation again. Standing before the flag, he spoke simply. They will try to scare you, he said. They will say we are alone. But remember, we have land, we have gold, we have people willing to work. What we refuse to have is exploitation. He then did something bold. He announced the creation of a National Mining Oversight Council composed not just of officials, but of worker representatives. For the first time, he declared, miners will sit at the same table as executives. The news shocked foreign observers. At the first council meeting, a miner stood across from corporate representatives. His hands were rough. His shirt was simple. He spoke slowly. For years, we asked for gloves, he said. Today, we sit here as equals. That is new. Traoré watched quietly. The executives could feel the shift. The power dynamic had changed. Meanwhile, across Africa, something unexpected happened. A union leader in another country publicly praised Burkina Faso's new law. A member of parliament in a neighboring nation proposed similar worker protections. Young activists began using a phrase online. Burkina model. The pressure that once felt isolating now began to spread outward. Foreign investors realized this was not just about one mine. It was about a movement. One evening, as Traoré reviewed reports alone, an advisor entered urgently. Sir, he said, breathless, gold production has not dropped. In fact, efficiency improved after safety upgrades. Injuries decreased. Worker morale is high. Traoré allowed himself a small smile. Respect creates productivity, he said. But he knew the battle was not over. He looked out at the city lights. They will try something else, he murmured. And far away, in another capital, a quiet meeting was already taking place. Men in suits discussed strategies. Economic pressure failed, one said. Then destabilize politically, another suggested. Maps were spread across the table. Plans whispered. Back in Burkina Faso, miners returned home with slightly heavier pay envelopes. Children noticed the difference. A little girl hugged her father when he brought new shoes for her. You're smiling more, she told him. He nodded. The president visited, he said simply. Across the country, hope grew, but so did tension. Because when you challenge powerful interests, they do not surrender easily. They watch. They plan. They wait. And Ibrahim Traoré knew the next test would be bigger than a mine. The next test did not come with explosions. It came with silence. One Monday morning, 3 major foreign mining companies announced a temporary suspension of expansion projects in Burkina Faso. International news channels called it a strategic pause. Investors called it risk management. In the markets of Ouagadougou, people called it something else. Pressure. Prices began to rise slowly. Fuel shipments were delayed. Online rumors spread again, this time more organized, more aggressive. Anonymous accounts flooded social media. Traoré is destroying jobs. Foreign companies are leaving permanently. The economy will collapse. At the same time, a protest suddenly appeared in front of the Ministry of Commerce. Banners printed professionally, slogans written in perfect French and English. The protesters claimed to be concerned citizens demanding economic stability. Intelligence officers moved quickly. "These protests are funded," one officer reported. "Money traced to offshore accounts linked to foreign corporate interests." Traoré listened calmly. "So the next stage begins," he said. He did not send soldiers to break the protest. Instead, he walked there himself. When his convoy arrived, cameras were already broadcasting live. The protesters froze when they saw him step out. He walked directly toward the crowd. "Who is your leader?" he asked. A young man stepped forward nervously. "We demand economic security," he shouted. Traoré nodded. "So do I," he replied. "Tell me your job." The young man hesitated. I work in marketing." "For which company?" Traoré asked. The man's eyes shifted. A journalist pushed forward with a microphone. "Mr. President, are you accusing these protesters of being paid?" Traoré looked at the crowd. "If you are here because you truly fear for your future," he said, "then come tomorrow to the National Mining Oversight Council meeting. Speak openly. But if you are here because someone paid you to shout, know this: no foreign wallet is stronger than the will of this nation." The protest began to thin. Some people left quietly. Others stayed but lowered their signs. Within hours, online investigators exposed payment screenshots linked to the organizers. The narrative shifted again. But that night, something more serious happened. In a remote region near a Cobalt site, armed men attacked a supply convoy. Equipment was burned. One security guard was injured. The attackers disappeared into the bush. The next morning, foreign media headlines were ready. "Violence escalates in Burkina Faso mining sector." Some analysts began suggesting that the president's policies were creating instability. In the war room, military and intelligence officers gathered around a table. "This was not random banditry," one officer said. "The attackers were well trained." "Foreign-backed?" another asked. "Highly likely." Traoré stood at the head of the table. "They want to prove we cannot manage our own resources," he said quietly. He gave 2 orders. First, increase security around strategic mining sites, but with strict instructions to protect civilians. Second, launch an independent investigation and publish every finding publicly. "No secrecy," he said. "Transparency is our shield." Within days, captured communications linked the attackers to a private security contractor operating in a neighboring country, one that had business ties to a suspended mining corporation. The evidence was undeniable. Traoré went live again. Holding up printed documents, he spoke directly to the camera. "They tried fear," he said. "They tried economic pressure. Now they try chaos." His voice grew stronger. "To those who think Africa can be bullied back into silence, this is a new generation." Across the country, something powerful happened. Miners volunteered to help protect their own sites alongside national security forces. Villagers reported suspicious movements quickly. Community leaders organized town meetings to discuss unity. In one mining town, an elderly woman stood before a crowd and said, "They take our gold and then fund violence to blame us for it? No more." The crowd roared in agreement. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in foreign capitals, executives were growing frustrated. "He's turning this into a continental movement," one said angrily. "Other African leaders are watching." And they were. Delegations from 2 neighboring countries quietly visited Ouagadougou to study the new mining law. Union leaders from 3 nations requested copies of the Worker Protection Framework. A regional summit was announced. When Traoré arrived at the summit weeks later, cameras followed him closely. During his speech, he did not shout. He spoke calmly. "For decades," he said, "we exported raw materials and imported poverty. We signed contracts in rooms where our people were not represented. We accepted investment that left our schools empty and our hospitals underfunded." He paused. That model is finished. Some leaders shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded slowly. If one nation stands alone, it can be pressured, he continued. If 10 stand together, pressure becomes negotiation. The phrase spread instantly online. If 10 stand together. Back home, the mining companies faced a new reality. Production had stabilized. Worker morale was higher. Local communities were receiving new funds for infrastructure. And despite threats, foreign corporations had not fully withdrawn. They needed the gold. They needed the cobalt. The global demand for batteries, electronics, and industry depended on it. Traoré knew this. One evening, he visited a nearly completed medical clinic near the original gold mine. The same bandaged worker from months earlier approached him, now healed. "My hand works again," the man said, flexing his fingers. "And your children?" Traoré asked. "They attend school with new books, funded by the royalty increase." Traoré nodded. "This is why we fight," he said quietly, but he also knew the struggle was far from over. His intelligence chief approached him later that night. "President," he said, "there are rumors of a financial blockade attempt through international institutions." Traoré looked toward the dark horizon. "They are tightening every screw they can find," the chief added. Traoré's answer was steady. "Then we build our own tools." He began accelerating plans for regional trade partnerships, reducing dependency on hostile financial systems. He pushed for local refining of minerals instead of exporting them raw. He invited African engineers to lead new technology initiatives. Each step made the resistance louder, but also made Burkina Faso stronger. And in the mining fields, where it all began, something had permanently changed. Workers no longer lowered their eyes when executives passed. They stood straighter. They knew the president had stood in the dust with them. In one powerful scene, a foreign executive returned to inspect the site months after the confrontation. This time, he wore a more respectful expression. He noticed something different. The workers were not afraid. One miner walked past him confidently, helmet secured, boots strong. The executive turned to the site manager. "What changed?" he asked quietly. The manager answered honestly. "They realized this land belongs to them." As the sun set over the red soil of Burkina Faso, golden light reflecting off the earth itself, Ibrahim Traoré stood watching the horizon. The ground beneath him still held wealth, but above it, something even greater was forming. A message spreading across Africa. Respect the workers. Protect the land. Stand together. Or leave. The retaliation came disguised as diplomacy. A formal letter arrived from an international financial institution. The language was polite, almost friendly. Due to recent regulatory uncertainty, it read, Burkina Faso's access to certain development funds will be temporarily reviewed. Temporarily. The Minister of Finance read it twice before bringing it to Traoré. "They are tightening credit lines," he said. "Infrastructure projects may slow. Currency pressure could increase." Traoré folded the letter carefully. "So now they squeeze from above," he said. Within days, currency traders began speculating against Burkina Faso's economy. Foreign media amplified doubts. Analysts predicted collapse again. In city markets, some merchants hesitated. "Will prices rise?" customers asked nervously. At the same time, whispers spread inside political circles. Opposition figures began giving interviews abroad, criticizing the mining reforms as reckless nationalism. One evening, a televised debate featured a former minister saying, "President Traoré is isolating Burkina Faso. We need cooperation, not confrontation." The clip spread quickly. The pressure was becoming multi-layered, economic, political, psychological. Inside the presidential office, advisors debated intensely. "We could soften the rhetoric," one suggested. "Delay some reforms," said another. "Negotiate quietly." Traoré listened to them all. Then he stood and walked to the window again. The city lights flickered below. "When a thief is caught," he said slowly, "he does not stop stealing, he changes tactics." He turned back. "They want us to doubt ourselves." The next morning, instead of responding defensively, he made a bold announcement. Burkina Faso would begin investing in local mineral processing plants, refining gold and cobalt inside the country instead of exporting raw ore. The news shocked observers. "That requires massive capital," a journalist asked during a press conference. "Yes, Traoré answered, and massive courage. He revealed preliminary agreements with regional partners neighboring African nations willing to co-invest and share technical expertise. The message was clear. If Western institutions pulled back, Africa would step forward. In the mining regions, this announcement ignited something powerful. Young engineering students saw opportunity. University professors requested meetings to discuss technical training programs. Even diaspora professionals abroad began contacting the government, offering expertise. But the backlash intensified. A sudden power outage hit a key industrial zone. Investigations revealed sabotage at a substation. Within hours, online accounts blamed government incompetence. Security forces traced suspicious activity around the site days before the outage. It was no coincidence. Traoré visited the damaged facility personally. Standing before broken transformers, he addressed workers. "They want to make us look incapable," he said. "They want investors to say, 'See, they cannot manage alone.'" He placed his hand on a burned cable. "We will repair this, and we will not be intimidated." Repairs began immediately. Engineers worked day and night. Within 48 hours, power was restored. The public saw resilience instead of collapse. Then came the most dangerous attempt yet. A rumor began circulating in rural areas that mining reforms would result in land seizures from local farmers. Panic grew in villages near cobalt deposits. Small protests formed, not funded this time, but fueled by fear. Traoré understood the danger. If rural trust broke, the entire movement could fracture. He traveled personally to one of the affected villages. There were no grand stages, no microphones, just a dusty gathering under a large tree. Farmers stood with folded arms. An elderly man stepped forward. "They say you will take our land for new mines," he said bluntly. Traoré removed his cap. "No land will be taken without consent and fair compensation," he replied calmly, "and no contract will ignore the voice of this village." A woman raised her hand. "They promised compensation before," she said. "We never saw it." Traoré nodded. "That is why the new law requires community representatives to sign every agreement. If your signature is not there, the mine does not open." Murmurs spread. He continued, "If anyone local or foreign tries to use my name to steal from you, report it directly. I will not protect thieves." The tension softened. An old farmer stepped closer. "Why fight so many powerful people?" he asked quietly. Traoré answered simply, "Because if we do not fight now, our grandchildren will fight worse battles later." Silence followed. Then the farmer extended his hand. Slowly, others followed. Trust held. Back in the capital, intelligence reports showed increasing coordination between foreign lobbyists and certain political figures inside the country. Money was flowing. One advisor entered Traoré's office late at night. "Sir," he said carefully, "there may be an attempt to initiate a vote of no confidence." Traoré's expression remained steady. "Democracy allows disagreement," he said. "If they gather the votes, I will face it. But foreign influence? Let the people see it," he interrupted. He then made another unexpected move. He ordered all mining contracts past and present to be published publicly online. Transparency became his weapon. Citizens could now see royalty percentages, ownership structures, timelines. Journalists began analyzing the documents. What they found shocked many. Previous contracts showed extremely low returns for Burkina Faso, sometimes as little as 5% after deductions. Now the new agreements reflected significantly higher national shares. Public opinion shifted strongly. Even critics struggled to defend the old deals. At a heated parliamentary session weeks later, the motion of no confidence failed. Not because opposition voices disappeared, but because the evidence was too visible. Meanwhile, the first phase of a small gold refining facility broke ground near Ouagadougou. The ceremony was modest. No luxury tents, no foreign dignitaries dominating the stage. Local engineers stood beside Traoré. "This is only the beginning," he said. Cameras captured a powerful image. Molten gold being poured into a mold stamped, "Refined in Burkina Faso." Across social media, the image spread like wildfire. Symbolism mattered, but the greatest change was quieter. In mining towns, families began noticing small improvements. Schools received new supplies, funded by increased royalties. Clinics gained better equipment. Road repairs began. Not miracles. Not overnight transformation, but visible steps. And visibility builds belief. Of course, resistance continued. Foreign think tanks published reports predicting long-term investment decline. Anonymous commentators accused the president of resource nationalism extremism. Yet production numbers remained stable. Worker injuries decreased. Local employment rose slightly due to new oversight roles. The narrative was no longer simple. One evening, as Traoré reviewed reports, his defense minister spoke honestly. "You have made powerful enemies," he said. Traoré nodded. "I expected that. But you have also inspired something larger." Traoré looked up. "What is that?" he asked. The minister smiled faintly. "Expectation." Outside, in the same gold mine where the confrontation began months earlier, workers gathered after a shift. One young miner held up his new helmet. "Before," he said, "we survived the day. Now we build the future." Another added, "And if any company forgets again, we know who to call." They laughed, but beneath the laughter was strength. Far beyond Burkina Faso, leaders watched carefully. Some quietly reached out to discuss similar reforms. Others hesitated, fearing backlash. But the idea had taken root. And ideas, once rooted in dignity, are hard to uproot. Late at night, standing alone on a balcony overlooking the quiet capital, Ibrahim Traoré breathed deeply. He knew the struggle was not finished. Economic warfare can last years, but he also knew something else. The fear had shifted sides. For the first time in a long time, foreign corporations were calculating risk, not just profit, and in the red soil beneath his boots, something deeper than gold was forming. Self-respect, and once a nation tastes that, it does not easily return to hunger.